Hey everyone, I just wanted to share a little context before you watch this. I'm brand new to videography and Woodrow was kind enough to be my first trial run with my new setup. Unfortunately, my mic was running a little bit too hot, so I couldn't salvage my audio, but thankfully Woodrow's mic came through perfectly. I really think there's something so beautiful about being seen in the process of learning and figuring things out. It's safe to say I've learned a lot about audio and I'm really grateful that Woodrow was willing to be my trial run. I'm so grateful for this conversation and Woodrow's willingness to be open with his story. I really hope you enjoy this conversation as much as I did. Thank you for being here.
So, my name is Woodrow Cowher. I studied finance at Case Western Reserve University, and before that I grew up on a beef farm. And it has been a long, weird fucking journey getting from there to here. But yeah, eventually I figured out that I should just draw pictures for a living, because when I worked finance, I couldn't stay awake at the desk. I would just kind of like end up doodling and doing little kind of abstract patterns and stuff on notepads, and that was the only thing that could keep me awake during the workday. So eventually I thought, like, if this is just what happens when I sit down and this is the only thing I can do to stay awake, then I should just be doing this. So I ended up pursuing art. I got into painting first because it is difficult to get into tattooing and find a decent apprenticeship. And I actually did 3 partial apprenticeships, and one that I was actually able to finish that I did at Bulldog Custom Tattooing in East Palestine, Ohio. So that was 2019 that I finished that. So before that, I basically did paintings of people's dogs, paintings of people's family members, murals, random graphic design stuff. I illustrated for this magazine out of London. I got my stack over here. I was really into the topic of philosophy, so I would take whatever I was into at the time and just start doing portraits of people while I was listening to an audiobook or a podcast or something like that. And eventually I had like a collection of pictures that I was just doing in my free time. So I sent it out to a few different places that I thought might illustrate it, like a few publishing companies, a few magazines and things like that. Just kind of like, hey, I got a bunch of pictures of philosophers. Hit me up if you want to work together. And Philosophy Now out of London eventually took me up on it. So I've been illustrating for them since 2016. Well, that's a very complicated question. So basically I see myself as like a student to the language of images, and I see myself as a collaborator with my clients. Like, not necessarily as an artist per se, more of like a craftsman, where it's not so much about like me expressing myself on somebody's skin, it's more about us working together to bring their vision to life so that they can have something that they'll be proud to wear. And I've learned a lot about how people interact with art through doing that, because whenever people are paying for something painful that's going to be there forever, they're very honest with you about what they want and what they don't want. And through that, you really learn a lot about like what imagery really actually means to people. Because you can Google, what does this symbolize or what does that symbolize, but when you have somebody in the chair and they have like an image that really means a lot to them, that they want somewhere on their body that they can see for the rest of their life, then it's something that they've taken seriously and it's something that they've thought about a lot of the time. At least for me, because I tend to have a little bit of a longer wait time. So people have to sit with this idea for a little while, and by the time they come to me, it's usually pretty well developed. Early on with tattooing, I decided that I wanted to get into cover-ups, be somebody who can fix old tattoos. Mm-hmm. And originally the motivation for that was economic. It was like, well, I don't think tattoos are always going to be as popular as they are now, or at least maybe it'll ebb and flow. Because this is 2019, this is the SoundCloud era with people getting face tattoos all over the place. It was really exploding as an industry at the time, and especially after COVID with all of the stimulus checks burning a hole in people's pockets. Tattooing was very popular at the time. And it has kind of ebbed and flowed a little bit since then. Not necessarily my business, but just the industry as a whole too. And People aren't always going to want new ink, but they're always going to want their ex's name covered up before the wedding. But as time has gone on, and I've really made a point to kind of study cover-ups and make a bit of a specialty out of it, I've found that it's one of the most meaningful things you can do as a tattoo artist. It's at least one of the things that has the most gravity to it, because whenever people are coming to have something covered, a lot of the time it's something that they've hated looking at for a long time. So you can really change how people perceive their own bodies with it. You can change how they see themselves with it. And you can take something that maybe was a dark chapter in their life and something that they regretted and something that represents a version of them that they don't want to be anymore. And you can give them a fresh start. So, like, the reactions you get from doing a good cover-up, there's nothing better. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, there's always space for anything people want to say in my booth. Like, there's nothing but space. I'm there to hear what they want. I'm there to hear the story. I'm there to hear why. I'm there to hear what they want it to be in the future. I'm there for all of it. So, yeah, I guess it's not so much about holding space as like that's the space for the space. I think that the primary thing that I feel connected to in my paintings is the idea of kind of an older ideal of art where you're aiming towards something that has a sort of a sense of transcendence to it, a sense of beauty or awe in the sense of like the sublime. You know, something that has a little bit of a terrifying, larger than life kind of feel, but at the same time something that draws you to it. Like the same kind of like scary but beautiful feeling you get whenever you're looking over a cliff at the Grand Canyon or something like that. What the painters in the Romantic period in the 1700s would have called the sublime, and some sense of inspiration. Because, you know, there's enough ugly, terrible things out there in the world. I think as a painter, at least what I try to aspire to is bring more beauty into it. A lot. At least a few hours a day. And yeah, completed painting takes me about 80 to 120 hours total, usually. A lot of that's just because I end up going back over it and redoing a bunch of things because they evolve as they go along. Whenever I start off, I don't really usually start off with a plan or like a vision for it. It's more of an exploratory process for me, where I'll start off with like the kernel of an idea, or I think of it like a pearl, where it starts off as like an irritating piece of sand in the clam's mouth, and then eventually goes over and over and over, and you add layer after layer after layer, and it becomes something beautiful and not just an irritant, you know? And then eventually it gets to a point where I step back from it and I can't really think of anything else I want to change. And at that point, that's when I call it. I want them to feel like they can find something new next time they look at it. Because, I mean, this isn't to diminish anyone else's work, and honestly this probably has a lot to do with the fact that I spend so much time with them in the process of making them. But I oftentimes feel whenever I look at something, there's a lot of artwork that whenever I look at it, I see it, I get the visual impression, and then it's kind of like, now what, you know? I need to be able to revisit something and find new things in it. And I try to have stories that have layers to them in my work. No, not at all. Honestly, I see the tattooing as kind of like art school in a way. Just try to get that A every day. I go in with the client, I just try to do the best job I can, and it's submitted for their approval at the end of it. So what they think is ultimately what matters. So I take what I learned from that, and I take all of this imagery that's kind of swimming around in my head from looking at my tablet all day, doing these drawings, doing everything that I do to prepare for the tattoo, and everything that comes up in the conversations around it. It's kind of swirling around in the blender of my head, and then these paintings that I end up doing when I get home are the result of that. It's just kind of like, a lot of it's sort of me processing the imagery that comes up in the tattoo world. So that's art school. These are my thesis statements. I am a big fan of yoga. Practice every day. Shout out to Yoga Factory in Lawrenceville, Squirrel Hill, and Yoga Hive. And I'm also a big fan of cooking. Cooking is honestly as much of a flow state for me as tattooing or painting. I love it. Worked in restaurants from about age of 14 until about the time I started tattooing. So I always tried to pay attention to chefs, and I was a big fan of Anthony Bourdain too. So I try to take every part of my life and make it part of the art project, if that makes sense. I try to make the cooking beautiful. I try to make, yoga's all about a lot of, well, at least the postural part of yoga is all about like achieving a certain form. So there's kind of a through line in my day-to-day that's all about achieving the best form that I can. So it's a lot about doing the same kind of things over and over and just trying to refine it, trying to do it a little bit better tomorrow than I did today, and so on and so on. Yeah, kind of like Groundhog Day, like the movie, like the myth of Sisyphus, and kind of like an art project wrapped up into one. It's kind of the whole thing. It's a way to take all of the disparate elements of my life and tie them together and make them cohesive in a big way. And it's kind of like a microcosm of the rest of my life. Like, especially the type of yoga I do is 26-2 original hot yoga, where it's in this room that is like 105 degrees, super humid. It's full of people in there sweating and exhaling too. So by the end of it, it's definitely hotter than that. So anything that you're doing in your life that doesn't work is going to show up there, and you're going to see the results of it. And anything in your life that does, you're going to see the improvements in there. So it's a room full of mirrors, but the room itself is kind of a mirror. Not to be too not to belabor the metaphor, but that's how it feels to me. Well, I have a lot less back pain. I'm a lot more focused. I make a lot less excuses for things. And there's a lot more of a rhythm to my life, It's just the whole idea of it being like a proving ground for what works and what doesn't in my life is something that I really try to study hard and pay attention to. And I find that the more I do that, the more everything in my life gets better. That's a good question. It might be kind of cliche, but waking up, because I feel like I kind of, for a long time, tried to sleepwalk through my day-to-day. I tried to, minimize the amount of actual effort and paying attention and concerted focus that I had in my life, and I tried to put that all into, one thing at a time. For a while it was relationships, for a while it was art, it was painting, for a while it was tattooing. There's been a lot of things where I had a thing that I used to just distract me from actually feeling things from day to day, And I think at this point in my life, I'm really making a point to actually be there and experience it and pay attention to it and learn from it and not just let things go by. Because, looking back, I've just been working my whole life pretty much, since I was 14. I remember all through high school, I was working all the weekends, working at a farm, working at local restaurants and stuff. And looking back, I just don't have any other memories. I just have, I went to work, I clocked in, I clocked out. I was focused on making money and having a savings and all that shit. And by the time I was freshman year in college, the money was all gone. It all just kind of felt wasted. And then, I thought I was going to learn from that. No, I didn't. So I was a workaholic again all through college, graduated early. But again, I honestly don't remember much from it. I just remember always being in a hurry. And it's been like that most of my life since, interspersed with little pockets where I felt like things happened, where I felt like, the camera was on and recording and I was making real decisions and I was actually experiencing things. And I would just kind of always get to a point where I just checked out and I was like, you know what, I'm just going to focus on work. I'm not going to think about other things. I'm just going to be a workaholic, dive into that, and everything else is secondary. And that's sort of been the pattern of my life for the most part. So at this point, I had some personal life stuff happen that sort of shook me out of that and made me really start paying attention a lot more. And since then, I've really just been at every turn that I can find, leaning harder into that, you know, embracing the pain, if you will. And again, a lot of this relates back to yoga. That's sort of been like the bedrock thing that I check in with first thing in the morning every day. And through that, I've been able to organize the rest of my life in a way that's a lot more positive, a lot more productive, where I'm a better friend to my friends, a better son to my parents, a better brother to my brothers, or at least trying to be. And every step of the way, just really taking note of what excuses am I making? What could I do better? What can I do to make today better than yesterday? See, I don't know. That's I think a lot of my life I've been really arrogant about a lot of things. I kind of had like the gifted kid syndrome a little bit, where I was given a lot of compliments early on in life that I've kind of hung on to. I'm used to, like, I've just always thought of myself as the guy who's good at these few things, and I've let that kind of alienate me and let that make me think I was better than other people in some ways that maybe in the back of the head I knew that I wasn't. Maybe in the back of the head I knew that I was just kind of imbalanced towards these things. And I think that what I'm learning to love about myself is the parts of me that are just like everybody else, like the human parts. Answering this kind of gets to different ideas of what loving yourself means. Because does loving yourself mean like looking at yourself and being like, that's awesome? Or does it mean like treating yourself like something that you love? Like taking care of yourself like somebody that you're responsible for taking care of? And, with things like painting, with things like work in the past, I've often taken pride in pushing myself beyond where I probably should. Making decisions based on how do I show off as much as possible? How do I be the hardest working person in the room beyond the point that it was good for me, or by extension anybody who cares about me, who supports me, who invests in me? And yeah, I mean, just the parts of me that are ordinary, the parts of me that are just like everybody else, the parts of me, well, I mean, that's basically all of me. I'm just kind of coming to recognize that I can't just lean on being exceptional at a couple things, or define or like shifting definitions to say that I'm exceptional or shit like that. I really need to just, like everybody else, just take care of myself, live life day by day, not try to cut corners, not take any kind of shortcuts. Just show up, be there, pay attention, and do the best that I can. And I think that for a long time I thought I could just lean on a few little talents and stuff, but at the end of the day, you have to be a whole person. So I'm learning to love the parts of me aside from those parts. I think that art, for me, like I said earlier, is about the pursuit of beauty in that old sense, like of where Socrates asked, what is beauty? And that kind of seems like a dumb question on its face. You hear that and you're like, well, what is beauty? Everybody knows what beauty is, Everybody knows what it's like to look at something and say that's beautiful. But people also say that beauty's in the eye of the beholder. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if I necessarily believe that entirely. I think that the aspects of beauty that we pay attention to, or the characteristics of what we consider beautiful, can vary from person to person. But I don't know if that means that beauty is in the eye of the beholder. I think beauty is real. I think that it's something that you can work towards and aspire towards, and that through pursuing that, through some kind of creative profession, through being an artist, through anything where you're making something that doesn't necessarily have a reason to exist other than that you're making it, you know? I think that's one of the things ultimately that draws people to art, is that somebody took the time to make something beautiful when they didn't have to. You know, it's just they put in the effort, and now here it is, and we get to have the result of it. I think that's great. But I think that through the pursuit of beauty, through asking yourself in front of a blank canvas, what should I create and why, you're kind of getting to some fundamental questions about how to live life. You know, and I think that like taking that metaphor and extrapolating from that, how do I choose any path? Why do I choose this over that? And I think that through the creation of art, through the pursuit of beauty, there's a pursuit of truth that's inherent in that, where by asking yourself, what should I create and why, you're asking yourself, what is worth creating? What is worth me spending my life on? Because, you know, any moment that you're working on these, there's hundreds of hours. I don't get any of those back. Those are spent. So whenever I'm making one of these paintings and I'm going through the process of revising it, redoing different parts of it, I'm always asking myself, like, what can I do that is going to redeem this and make this worthwhile? And I think that you learn a lot about how to live your life by doing that. Thank you, Mom and Dad. Honestly, my parents are awesome. They're inspiring as shit. They're both going into their 60s, and they're more active than ever. And I respect the hell out of them for refusing to age. And that's how I want to be. So, yeah. And thank you for filming this.